the book of Job. This book is one of the wisdom books in the Old Testament and is featured usually after the book of Esther, but sometimes after the books of Maccabees, depending on which Bible we pick up. The book of Job is a book of wisdom and probably one of the most beautiful treatments of the mystery and wisdom of God. It is a book filled with many questions and the ultimate answers. But it is a book that treats the issues of pain and suffering, especially that of suffering of the unjust, by posing questions and then resolving those questions with answers we do not expect. And so this book is not what we would expect on the surface. It's not the kind of worldly wisdom where we often perceive wisdom as an answer to the very question that I'm asking. But rather, it is a book that allows us to dive into the very mystery of God, even as we pose certain questions, as we find ourselves in the midst of confusion and difficulty. And the resolution to the problems that are posed in the book come in a way that is not expected. And so we enter into the study of the book of Job with this overview by first recognizing that we are here entering into the kind of wisdom of God that treats the reality of our own questioning in a way that we're not used to. Not by providing simple answers to complicated questions, but basically by providing the kinds of answers that are going to help. The main character of this story of Job is a chieftain, a pious and upright man who is upright in the eyes of God, righteous, faith-filled, and who experiences a reversal of fortune. From all the benefits and blessings he receives and experiences in life, he is reduced to a life of misery, pain, and suffering. And the main question that is posed, and most people think that this book is about answering the question of why do the just suffer in this life, or why do the innocent suffer? This book is not trying to answer that question, even though this is the question at the surface. It seems, in other words, that this book is about answering the question of suffering and the meaning of suffering. But actually, even though that's the question that is posed, the book answers a much deeper and more satisfying question, which is under the surface, and which allows the original question to be resolved, even as we go deeper. If this sounds confusing, hopefully by the end of our presentation, it will not be as confusing. But first, let's enter into the book by looking at Job. It's not really important to know exactly where or when this takes place, because, to be honest, no one really knows. The author is unknown, there are many speculations, but really, no one really knows for sure. The timing is unknown as well. Most suggest that it's around the 5th century BC. And the place, named in the first chapter at the beginning, the land of Uz, is a place that we cannot locate. And so we are here, right from the beginning, invited to realize that the historical reliability of this book is not what is most important in terms of the wisdom of the book. What is at the heart of the book is the answer to the deepest questions of our human experience, from God's perspective. The book begins in this way. In the land of Uz, there was a blameless and upright man named Job, who feared God and avoided evil. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him, and he had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 5,000 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, and a great number of work animals. So he was greater than any of the men of the East. So right from the start, the scene is set. We're dealing with the kind of figure that would be very impressive. Not only is he rich and wealthy, not only is he blessed by having a family, having sons and daughters and many resources, but he is blameless before God. He is a man of faith. He is a man of righteousness, a man of integrity. And right from the beginning, there is this encounter between Satan and God. And so it says, one day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Whence do you come?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming the earth and patrolling it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? That there is no one on earth like him, blameless and upright, fearing God and avoiding evil." But Satan answered the Lord, "Is it not for nothing that Job is God-fearing? Have you not surrounded him and his family and all that he has with your protection? You have blessed the work of his hands and his livestock. But now put forth your hand and touch anything that he has, and surely he will blaspheme you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand upon his person." So Satan went away forth from the presence of the Lord. Right from the beginning, we see that this is really about something deeper than just retelling a story of actually exactly what happened historically speaking, because Satan and God do not have conversations like this. But there is an underlying theological reality here, and it's important for us to notice that God permits certain difficulties to fall upon his faithful one. Why? In order to test his faithfulness. And this is the reality for all of us. We say in theology that God doesn't cause bad things to happen, but God permits bad things to happen to us so that good can come out of it. And so here is that theological principle in a poetical way in this conversation between God and Satan. Satan basically undermining the fidelity and righteousness of one of God's best servants. In other words, God tempting or being tempted by Satan. And right away it's easy to see how this would have been played out also in the New Testament with Jesus in the desert being tempted by Satan, and in the Garden of Gethsemane being tempted by Satan. This is just an expression of what happens to all of us in many ways. We experience temptations. That's just the reality of life. But our temptations have to be viewed as a training ground and a proving ground for our faithfulness to God. And so good can come out of them. We always have to think of it that way. That when we are tempted, when we are under duress, it's the greatest opportunity for us to grow in our faith. And so here will be the great test for Job. Job now, as it continues, will be under attack in terms of losing all the blessings and benefits, worldly benefits that he enjoys in his life. And a series of tragedies happen. As we continue reading, you will see that he loses his wealth, he loses his livestock, he loses his children, and even his own health. And so very quickly, By chapter 3 of the book of Job, we find Job in mourning. He is overcome by these tribulations, by the reversal of his fortune, and he is confused. And all he can do is place himself at the mercy of God. And so he puts on the robe of penance, and he sits in ashes in silence. Okay? So what is Job's initial response to all of that is happening? It is silence. And I think that is very, very important as a lesson to begin with, that there are many things that can happen in our life, in our world, even in our own realities, that are difficult for us to understand. And one of the most important things is for us to resist the temptation to try to make sense of things right away and to find something or someone to blame. Some things are mysteries, and we need time, and we need silence, and we need prayer, and we need penance in order to respond as a way of response to these realities. What happens next? 3 friends show up after learning that their good friend and a righteous man has been experiencing this lack of fortune, which they would perceive as a lack of blessing from God. They come in order to help him, to encourage him, to be of assistance to him. And they sit with him in ashes, in silence for a while, and then slowly the book continues with each of the friends addressing Job. And we don't have to go through all the speeches, because the majority of the book is the speeches of each of the friends, speaking, trying to explain the problem away, to propose a simple solution to a complicated problem. In other words, to give an answer to the question to which they have no business answering. And so they answered the problem. What is the problem? Well, why is this happening? What's going on here? Well, they're proposing to speak to this problem, to answer. And so they question the righteousness of Job. Each one of them, in their own way, basically proposes a solution, tries to oversimplify the problem by saying, I have an answer. And their answer is simply, you must have done something wrong, God is not blessing you, therefore confess your sin. And Job, in his honesty, continues to respond to them by saying, I cannot accept your solution. In truth, in my own conscience, I cannot say that I have done something that warrants this kind of a curse from God. And so I will not admit to something that I know within me is not truth. So here we have the friends of Job proposing what they see as truth on the surface. If you do good things, God will bless you. Since you have all your blessings have been removed, it must follow logically you've done something wrong, and therefore you have to admit it, you have to ask for forgiveness. And then ultimately, as Job continues to say, I don't know why this is happening, but it's not because of this. I reject your proposals. I reject your oversimplifications of the situation. And so this is how it progresses, where the friends of Job are continually becoming discouraged and impatient with Job. Why? Because they all want an answer. They want to solve the problem of pain and suffering and the cause of those things. And Job wants that too, but he's not willing to settle for an overly simplified and untrue solution. He's not willing to do that. Again, he is proving to be a righteous man and a man of truth. And so, he would rather suffer the consequences of not knowing than to accept an answer that he knows is not truthful. And so Job begins to slowly call upon God. He knows that his friends are not able to help him understand the reason. And so, in a sense, Job now shifts his focus to God and wants to put God on trial. And his call upon God is to say, answer me, respond to me. Why have you allowed this to happen to me? And we'll go here to chapter 25. No. Job's reply. I think we're here. Here it is, chapter 29. And there's a long speech in which Job basically calls upon God to answer him. And on the one hand, we could say, well, this is kind of a bold approach, isn't it? How can we put God on trial? Who are we? But here Job is speaking, even though he's being quite bold and maybe even inappropriate, he's speaking honestly from the heart. He's saying, I want to know the truth, but only God can provide the truth. So I want God to explain himself, to tell me what is happening. And then God appears. And here's God's speech to Job. Then the Lord addressed Job. This is chapter 38. Then the Lord addressed Job out of the storm and said, who is this that obscures divine plans with words of ignorance? Gird up your loins now like a man. I will question you, and you tell me the answers. So God inserts himself into this situation now by responding to the invitation of Job, but not in order to answer Job's questions, but in order to question Job. So there's a reversal here. Job thinks he can question God. God says, no, first, gird up your loins, stand up like a man. In other words, grow up and first answer my questions. Now that's a bold approach, isn't it? But God is about bold approaches. So here God speaks to Job and says, answer these questions. Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determines its size? Do you know? Who stretches out the measure lines of it? In what were its pedestals sunk? And who laid the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang in chorus and all the sons of God shouted for joy. And who shot within doors the sea when it burst forth from the womb? And so God is basically reminding Job of his own limitations and mortality. In other words, God is setting the stage here for what will happen by saying, okay, let me remind you who you're talking to. You cannot question me until first you remember who you are. That you are a mere mortal, that you are one of my creations. And so we cannot speak as equals until you humble yourself. A very important moment. And so he goes on for quite some time. God goes on asking these sorts of questions about creation, about the world. And where were you, Job? What was your role in it? How do you measure against me? And so the Lord continues to speak in this way to Job. And then Job answers the Lord and says, I know that you can do all things. So now Job responds after hearing God and recalibrating his view of God in himself, the grandeur of God and the mystery of God that is beyond his own understanding. Now that Job has this kind of clear vision of the mystery of God and the greatness of God, this is what he says, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be hindered. I have dealt with great things that I do not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I cannot know. I had heard of you by word of mouth, but now my eye has seen you. Therefore I disown what I have said, and I repent in dust and ashes. What follows is the epilogue, which is Job's restoration. And it came to pass after the Lord had spoken these words to Job, that the Lord said to his friends, I am angry with you and with your 2 friends, for you have not spoken rightly concerning me, and as has my servant Job. Now therefore, take 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a holocaust for yourselves, and let my servant Job pray for you, not to punish you, so that I do not punish you severely. For you have not spoken rightly concerning me, as has my servant Job. So this response of Job, which resolves the entire tension, is not what we expect. What we expected was that Job's main question, which was, why is this happening to me, would be answered by God, and therefore it would be resolved. Instead, as God appears to Job and offers him an experience of God's mystery, majesty, and glory, Job's question goes away. It's no longer relevant. It no longer matters. You see, what Job thought was necessary to receive satisfaction and joy and peace is not what gave him peace. It's not the answer to his question that was needed. It was an experience of the living God that he needed. Once he encounters God, all the questions go away. They are irrelevant, no longer necessary. See, the answer God provides is not the answer that Job expected, but it's even more important. God's gift to Job is a gift of restoring the relationship between Job and God and allowing Job to repent of what he had said, to accept and to know that now that he has experienced God in this intimate way, he needs nothing more. Everything is now at peace. And God's restoration of Job comes after Job's experience of God's intimacy, you see. And so this book really offers us the precise answer to all of our troubles. What is the answer to all our questions, or all our troubles, or all our difficulties? The answer is heaven, an experience of God. Once we see God in his fullness, we will our perception of what we need and what is necessary for us in order to have peace, all of that will change. God alone suffices. That's why I love this ending. It says, now that my eye has seen you, I disown what I have said, and I repent in dust and ashes. In other words, I submit myself to you, not because I have to, but because I want to. Now even the pain and suffering and everything I have to go through, it's nothing. It's all worth it because I have seen you. And this is to echo the words of St. Augustine, really, the answer to all our woes. St. Augustine said, "My heart was restless, O God, until it rested in you." And so the book of Job is really not a book that provides an answer to the meaning of suffering. It goes deeper than that. It provides an answer to the ultimate meaning and purpose of humanity, of all of us, which is God, an experience of God, proper ordering of ourselves to God, proper acceptance of God's greatness, divinity, goodness. Once we have that, our perceptions change, and what we think we needed changes. We are at peace. The book of Job is perhaps a great surprise to us because it deals with very deep and never-ending questions of the purpose of different things. And yet the answer it provides is a surprise, but it's also a pleasant surprise, I believe, because it offers us the most simple answer and solution to all of our challenges, and that is trust God. Don't worry about having all the answers, all the understanding, everything resolved, everything making sense, because that, at the end of the day, is not necessary. God will give us the understanding in ways that is helpful to us, but to understand everything for us is impossible and also unnecessary. Only God is needed. Pursuit of truth, especially when we are dealing with great mysterious realities of our human existence. Always being honest with ourselves. Not offering overly simplistic solutions to complicated problems. Sometimes even wrestling with difficulties, but by first presenting ourselves before God. Not questioning God, but allowing God to be with us, to reveal His grace, His goodness, and His presence in our midst. Job is seen as a righteous man because he recognizes that only God is the answer, and everything is worth it if at the end we encounter Him as Job did. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.